All right, that'd be great. Thanks, Britta. Thanks so much, Britta. So to kind of dig in a little bit and tell you just briefly about myself for the people who haven't been with me, I've been in education, I think this is year 28. I was a science teacher for 20 years, and then I've been working with schools doing NGSS for the last 8 years. So that's kind of working with international schools K-12 to dig into the standards. My best and like most exciting learning that I've done has been working with elementary teachers. I've learned so much just from good elementary teachers on how to teach explicitly science. And so I've learned a lot. And I hope that I can share some of that with you today. The biggest COVID takeaway for me has been like learning how to do explicit instruction around the cross-cutting concepts and the practices using mini lessons. I did a lot of work with the Teachers College of what mini lessons are. And so I kind of stole some of the best things of that. And we're going to do some of that today. So let me get started. I'm going to share my screen and share a few slides. As we go, if you have questions, always throwing those in the chat would always be probably most helpful. Just so I can kind of get there. Let me try that one more time. And let me try that. Okay, cool. Does that show up for you guys okay, Britta? Okay, perfect. Awesome. So we're going to call this Mini Lessons 2.0. This is K5 version. For me, the website that we continue to use and it continues to grow is the Wonder of Science. That's where I put all of my work. And when I say we, it's like work with my wife, Laura. You can see her here and she's in the chat kind of lurking as well. And so we put all of our work up there, Creative Commons. So it's stuff that you can use. I always have like new ideas that I want to get there, and it's always a little bit of a challenge to get them there. We put together a web page for all the work we're doing with the Tri Association. And so let me put that in the chat now. Like that. So we're going to do some breakout group work. If you want to have a look at some of my slides or have links to mini lessons, this is kind of the webpage that we'll use for that. And if it's your first time with me, you can always scroll way down and you can look at other workshops that I've done and look at other things that we've done if you want to kind of go back to that. So that's where we'll put our work together. You'll go into breakouts and I'll share this again before we go there, but we're going to do some thinking. And the best way to do thinking I've found is that getting into a breakout with other teachers who teach similar things, and then just getting our thinking out so we can kind of share that. So we'll do that there. NGSS is really, it is a paradigm shift in the way that we're asked to teach science. And the biggest shift I would say is that old school was really about leading with the content and explaining the science that the kids needed to understand, and then eventually doing a little bit of exploration. I think the key thing we want to have them doing is making sense from the get-go, like from the beginning, getting kids to really dig into authentic phenomena. Equity is a big piece. It probably should have been a bigger piece over the last 10 years. But for me, where does NGSS fit in that puzzle? I think a lot of schools for kids who are struggling in math and reading ends up being like more math and reading. And even during the pandemic, we're just cutting back on the amount of science and social studies that we're doing. And so I think kids can get really big wins if they can engage in an authentic phenomena, and it could be a leveler in your classroom. For kids who aren't doing great, like everybody lives in the world and every kid's excited about how the world works. And so giving them time to do that. I've never done a lesson in a school where I say we're going to do science and the kids don't just like explode. They're excited. Like kids love doing science. It's just that we don't always have time to do it. So this is old school. And I don't know if anybody kind of remembers the projectors, the overhead projectors from back in the day, but old school was really, let's just teach all this content. If we're going to teach something about the weather, or we're going to teach things about like what are the body systems, we just kind of direct instruction. And that was always on, in high school, it's always on a overhead. A lot of the time it was on some kind of an anchor chart in elementary. And then we do some demos along the way. Bill Nye and the way Bill Nye taught science was really cool, but also is a pretty dated version of teaching science, where you explain some science and then you would do a demo where you explain exactly what's going on in the demo. So that is an old school way of teaching science. Then there'd be some lab. So like FOSS kits were great in elementary to give something that the kids could do, but a lot of the labs in there were just pretty straightforward. And it was just follow this, do this, follow this. And the kids were not really scientists. And so we got good at this. So like you've done, like for years and years and years, we got better and better at delivering science in this way. And so this is a paradigm shift. And so what is the big shift? in the way that we should be teaching science. The way you teach content now is different, and the way we do it is we don't lead with the explanation, we lead with some phenomena. So there's some phenomena that we're going to try to figure out. A phenomena is simply something in the world that we don't understand, but we're interested in, and we're going to try to figure this out together. My own idea of what a phenomena has grown over the last 8 years. Let me give you an example of a phenomena that we used when we were in Colombia. It would just be the condor. The Andean condor is a really good example of a phenomena. I can take this in a ton of different ways. You don't really know what content I'm teaching. I could be talking about structures and functions of an animal and how it allows them to survive. I could be talking about ecosystems. We could talk about like how humans are impacting the environment and how is that impacting the condor. But the key thing is everybody loves a condor and everybody wants to kind of dig into that. And so the phenomena kind of sits center of what we're doing. It's the phenomena that we're trying to understand. What are these other dimensions then? These other dimensions are how we make sense of the phenomena. And so how do we develop a model, or how do we ask a question? Today, we're going to be looking at structure and function. We're going to be constructing arguments today. So it's how do we make sense of a phenomena? How do we do the science? In the old school, just like we used to spend so much time in teaching the content, we have to do the same thing in these other dimensions. We teach kids how to develop a model, or how to ask a good scientific question, or how to use evidence to make a claim. We teach them that, and then they apply it to the phenomena that we're doing. If you've been to one of my trainings in the past, I think the biggest thing you'll notice in the way that I'm switching up what we're doing today is these mini lessons will be straightforward, direct instruction. I'm going to tell you exactly how to do it and show you how to do that. And we're not going to use phenomena in the mini lessons. Because if I do that, I'm stealing that wonder away from you. We're just teaching you how to do a skill, and then we apply it into the phenomena itself. And so tonight we can't do all of this, so I'm going to choose a couple. We're going to start with the cross-cutting concept of structure and function. If this is just jargon to you, the difference between a cross-cutting concept and a practice, a cross-cutting concept is how we think about a material, or how do we think about a phenomena. And so on my little graphic here, I have these concepts coming out of the person's brain on my graphic. And then the science and engineering practices are what we're going to do. And so as I chose what we're going to do tonight, we're going to do argumentation. Argumentation is how you make a claim with evidence and reasoning. It's a really important thing that they need to learn how to do in science, but also it's super important to learn how to do this in your writing. It's good to learn how to do this in your social studies unit. And so I thought that would be the one that would give you most like interdisciplinary work tonight. So that's what we're going to dig into today. Example, let's say we're about to inquire into a first grade unit and we're going to look at the hummingbird as a phenomena. So everybody loves a hummingbird. What's great about a hummingbird is that there is a really deep connection between hummingbirds and the plants they pollinate. And so you see a lot of connections between the structures there. And so let's say that my students are going to inquire into the hummingbird. And we're going to think of the hummingbird as a system. And then what are the parts of the hummingbird that allow the hummingbird to work? So before we get there, if structure and function is really important in the unit, I want to give the kids the tools that we can use to think about structure and function before we actually get the phenomenon. And so let's start with that. So I'm going to start by changing this up for a second. I'm just going to move next to the document camera. So let's see who's jumping up the top for me. Thomas, can you see this? Is this showing up for you? Let me try that again. Does that show up for you, Thomas? Can you see like a little gear and there's
your model?
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Thanks. So I'm going to just do a little mini lesson right now. So you'll be my students, and we're just going to do a mini lesson right now on structure and function. We're going to do one of those. I'll do this one. It'll be kind of a like I do it, then we'll do it together, and then you're going to do some on your own. So I'm going to do a mini lesson on structure and function, and then we'll kind of put you in groups and you can do that. I'm going to start just using these little blocks. And these blocks are just concepts. They're ways to think about the science that we're trying to learn. So when you're looking at the structure and function of something in science, we don't just like randomly look at structures and functions. The first thing we want to do is decide what are we interested in and what are we going to look at structure and function in. And in science, we call that a system. What is the system that we're going to investigate? And so before we get to the hummingbird, which will be the system in a second, I'm going to show you how to look at a system more deeply. And so I could think of these gears as a system. A system just, you could do a mini lesson on systems if you wanted to, but a system is just a group of parts that are working together. And so if I'm teaching a group of first graders, like we're going to dig into structure and function, I could choose this as a system, but that might be a little bit too complex. And so I'm going to make it even simpler. Just let me take this apart for a second. Let's just look at this gray gear. And we're going to look at this gray gear just as a system. And we're going to see what are the structures and what are the functions here. And so when kids are getting started, I always define the system for them, because now they know what are we really looking at, or where's our focus going to be. And so I want our focus right now to be on this gray gear. So the system is going to be the gray gear. That's what we're starting to study. And so now as you're watching your screen, we all know that we're investigating this, or we're looking at this structure right here, or this is the system that we're studying. The next thing we've got is structure and function. I'm sure you've heard of this before, either as structure and function or form and function. So a structure is what something is made up of. So it's the parts, or what the parts are made up of. The easiest way to look at a structure is to just look at it and draw it. So structure is what something's made up of, and a function is what does it do. And so those two fit right next to each other like that, because the structure makes the function and the function requires the structure. And so let me go back to the gear again. So as I look at this, the first thing that jumps out to me as the gear, something that seems interesting as a gear, are these little teeth. So the teeth are interesting to me. And when I say teeth, what I mean by that is the teeth are going to be these little pieces around the outside. So the parts around the outside of the gear. Lots of times, if I'm doing this with kids, I would want that little pointer finger and say, like, what we're investigating right now is this tooth right here. Or you could put an arrow on it, or we could label it. Like, I want you to all be focused just on that. And so if I'm looking at the tooth, what I'm trying to do is show you my thinking right now. I would say, this is what teeth look like on the gray gear. And then I could sketch out what they look like. So maybe the teeth of a gear look like that. Especially in lower elementary, you don't want kids like writing a bunch of text about what the structure looks like, just have them draw it. And so I would say the structure fits just like that. And then let me show you my thinking. What does the function do? Well, now I kind of have to look at how the gray gear works. And when I turn this gear, I don't know if you can see that, but when I turn the gear, the teeth are pushing on the other gear. And so if I were to say, what is the function of the teeth is to connect and move other gears like that. So this would be the structure, and that would be the function. Now, ways that you could get kids doing this on their own and like giving them more control is I could put these apart once we've learned what structure and function is, and just have to match it. Like, is the structure connecting it, or is the function connecting it? And trying to make that clear connection between what the structure is and then what the function is. What's another thing on this gear that I think is interesting might be this handle. So the handle, which is right here. So I could just write on here, like, the handle is something that's important. So I could write that as an important structure. And then I could have the kids draw a picture of, like, what does the handle look like? And then let's try to figure out, okay, what's the function of that? Other things that you could do would be like a cat, like you've got the whiskers of a cat. What's the structure? What does it do? Things that you're really familiar with, a shoe, a cup, a chair. Just try to use tangible things. And as I'm doing this, I'm not trying to trick the student into some phenomena. I'm just trying to teach them that specific skill. So what I'm going to do right now is we're going to put you into breakout groups. And so let me stop sharing that. And I'm going to share just where we're going to go. So let me share my screen, and I will put this in the, let me do it like this. Let me put that website again in the chat. Is that loading for you guys okay? Does that work? Could you click on the link in there? Perfect. Awesome. Yeah, question in the chat. Do you often use this concept of a think aloud when teaching? Totally. And I think a question in the chat is, I think the worst thing to do is like, we're going to do science and now here's a huge mini lesson. I think it's better when we're trying to figure out this phenomena, we're asking some questions. And then I, as a teacher, would say, like, we really have to look at the structure and function of this hummingbird or this weird structure and function that we're looking at. Then I bring the mini lesson in. It's like, we're going to do some structure and function. And so like, now is a good time to do it, would be a question that's how I'd kind of answer that question. So let me go back to, sharing my screen for a second. So this is what we're going to use to kind of do our work over the next little bit of time. So you can see here that we're in this section here, so elementary K-5. So you're about to go into a breakout room, and when you go in the breakout room, you'll be in a group with other people. First thing you should do is just say hi, introduce yourself, say where you are. But you want to remember what group number you are. So let's say I'm in group 8. That's the group that I'm in. It'd be great if one person in your group could click on the Google Slides and load that Google slide. We're going to do two bends in our time together today. We're going to do looking at structure and function, and then we're going to look at argumentation. So let's say I'm in group 8 and we're looking at structure and function. What I would do is just click on this first slide, and then I could just load up that slide. It's going to be a thinking slide, so we can start showing what we're thinking. So let me show you what that would look like. So the first one we would work on together is going to be a zipper. So we're going to work on a zipper. I've kind of defined on here what the system is. So I've said the system is a zipper. What you want to do is figure out what is the structure as a part of the zipper, and then what does it function? What does it do? And we're going to do this as a group. We're kind of doing it together. You could just write the structure in this box by clicking on it. If you want to use some of your mad Google drawing skills, you could sketch out what it looks like. You surely could do that if you want to. On all of these, we've got bigger slides on the next one if you want to see a more detailed version of the zipper. And you probably have a zipper on your clothes. And so you could just play with your zipper a little bit if you want to understand better like how it works. But what we're going to do is spend some time going through identifying what are the structures and what are the functions of the zipper. So if you could spend like 6 or 7 minutes there after we've introduced ourselves. And then the next thing we have on the next slide is we've got a hummingbird. And so what we're going to try to do with the hummingbird is do the same thing. What are some interesting parts of the hummingbird? What are some structures that we have? And then what are some functions? You can kind of see that we're going from concrete to the abstract. Laura, are you with us? Can you hear me okay? Awesome. Do you mind starting up some breakout rooms? Can I get a thumbs up if you know what we're doing? I'm looking for 80% thumbs up. I got it. Awesome. So I will kind of jump in to help out if you get lost. But the key thing is just start.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
The screen, and then everybody could kind of show their thinking. Let me just take a look at one. I know there was a little bit of confusion too on what group we're in. Just a second. Thanks. A lot of recording going on. So we were just using 1 through 20. And so I know that was like, I think group 1 said somebody's typing in our slides. So if you're looking for a slide in the next breakout and somebody's in it, you could use any of these ones. 21 through 50 should be open, or you could just make a copy of it if you want to and start working in that. But let's take a look at some of the work that we were doing. So this would be group 1, I guess. They were looking at the zipper, and I would say as we look on the right side, they've identified the structures on the left side, and then they're talking about what they do kind of on the right side. And so if I were to assess your understanding of function and structure, I think you're doing pretty good. What's helpful is probably the label diagram on the left side. You knew what the structures were. So then I would want to see as we go deeper into, can we identify the structures in the hummingbird when I haven't given you those? And so they're talking about the beak, the tongue, the feathers, and the wings, and then kind of what they're doing on the right side. They've got a really, I don't know if the video loaded for you, but their tongue is really freaking me out a little bit, the hummingbird tongue. It's ridiculously long, and it makes me kind of wonder what's going on the inside. So I would say we're doing pretty good on our understanding of structure and function. I know that I've done lessons in class where kids don't know the difference. They think of structure and function as one thing, and that becomes kind of problematic over time. And so always doing like mini lessons before we get to the phenomena so they can be successful, I think is a key thing. So let me stop sharing, and we're going to just do another quick mini lesson. That was really just on thinking around structure and thinking around function. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to dig in more deeply to the doing of science, and how do we gather evidence in science, and most importantly, how do we make claims in science? So we're going to do a little mini lesson on argumentation. As before, I'm going to start with this one, and then we'll have you kind of go into breakouts, and so you can give it a try. So give me a second, let me share. So we're moving, that was really a lower elementary example. So the first one we did was, let me share that again. So the first one we were doing was really a lower elementary kind of a lesson. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of sharing issues. Let me try that last time. Okay, does that show up for you okay? So the one we're going to dig onto is next is engaging in argumentation and evidence. And so this is more of a, I'm aiming for third grade level. So forces and forces in motion is a really big part of NGSS, especially things that we don't like, that we can't see. And so in the group, you'll be given this kind of a phenomena. You're going to try to figure out what's inside these different blocks. And you're going to make claims as to what you think is going on the inside of them based on like how they interact with other objects. And so we're really starting to look at what are called non-contact forces, forces when things are not touching. So before I get there, though, I want to do a quick mini lesson on how do we do claims in science and how do we make claims with evidence. And so, Laura, is this showing for you okay? Question, claim, evidence, reasoning. Try that again.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Awesome. So we're going to go through and just do a quick, this is called a CER, or claim evidence reasoning. One thing that I think gets kids a little confused is we'll have them lots of times in ELA write a persuasive essay. And a lot of the time kids are making a claim to start with and then supporting that with evidence. And it's really not how science works. In science, what we do is we always start with the evidence first before we ever start to make a claim with reasoning. And so I'm going to show you how to do this, and we're just going to use an object again. And so this would be a mini lesson in gathering evidence to start. And so I'm going to start with this object right here. And so we're looking at this solid object. I always try to use concrete examples when I'm doing this. And so I would just start writing down, what is some evidence that I noticed from this? And I would tell kids in science class, evidence has to be things that we observe. So it has to be something that I could see. So if I write down some of the evidence that I'm noticing, the first thing I would say is that it's blue. And you could have the kids help you with that. I could say that it's made of wood. I could say that it is pointy. And so this would be like all evidence that we're collecting. If I'm doing a quick mini lesson on evidence, I could say all of this evidence that we're gathering so far is really good, but it's also just qualitative evidence. It's just what do we notice? And I don't have any really good quantitative evidence in here. So getting quantities is also important in science. So we could say, what's some other quantitative evidence I could gather? I could say that it has 5 sides. I could say that it is what else could I say? I said that it's maybe 2 inches high. I could say that it's 28 grams. So that would be what evidence looks like. So before kids are trying to construct an argument, I want them to kind of make sense of what is evidence and how do we collect evidence like this. Next thing we would do, you can never make a claim with evidence and reasoning unless you have a question. And so you're only doing an argument if we're really trying to answer some kind of a question. So I'm going to start with this. I'm just going to give you the question. So let's say the question is this: is this object a polygon? So is this a polygon? And so if we were to say, is this a polygon? Let me just kind of do a think aloud and show you kind of what I'm thinking. I would say, man, maybe what is a polygon? I don't teach math, and so I might have to figure out what a polygon is. And so a definition might be helpful. A polygon is a 2-dimensional closed shape with straight sides. Can I get a thumbs up if you think this is a polygon? How many of you think this is a polygon? So I'm seeing not a lot of thumbs up. So we're saying this is not a polygon. So we're going to write a claim, and the claim would be, is this a polygon? The claim is going to be no. So once we gather the evidence, then we start to make a claim. What would be good evidence that would show me that this is not a polygon? Being blue is not going to help me because you could have a blue polygon. What else? A pointy shape could be a polygon, or being wood with a polygon as well. But the fact that it's 5-sided is really good evidence that it's not 2-dimensional. If it's got 5 sides, then it's got to be 3-dimensional. And so once you get the question, then you can start to go through and say, what's going to be good evidence? The fact that it has some mass, or it might be 2 inches high, that might be good evidence that this is not a polygon. And so the first thing you should always do when we're trying to construct an argument is gather the evidence first before we start to make some kind of a claim. And then the next part is the part that is the hardest to do, but we need to have all of our kids doing this. Writing the reasoning is really, really difficult. And so let me just walk you through my reasoning. A lot of the time, what kids will do is they'll just give me more evidence in the reason. They'll just restate what their evidence is. They would say like it's three-dimensional, and then that doesn't really help us out. What I would say is it's 3D and polygons are 2D. Therefore, this is not a polygon. And so what are the three parts of a good argument? It always has an answer to the question. It's got the important evidence, and then it's going to have some reasoning that's connecting it together. When we write an argument, it always goes in this order. We make a claim with evidence and reasoning, but I hope you're picking up on this. It's not the order in which we do it. In science, what we always do is gather all the evidence first, and then we see what evidence does this, like what story does this evidence have to tell us? And then we're able to make a claim with reasoning. And so a lot of the time I find if you introduce the question at the beginning, they don't have a good time of like looking for the evidence. They just think it's a hypothesis and they make a guess as to what they think. And then they try to support it. And so a really good tip I would give you is always start with the evidence and then get claim and reasoning after that. So this is just me showing you my thinking. And so what we're going to do is, let me stop sharing for a second. You're going to go back into the breakout groups. I want to give you a certain amount of freedom. Like first thing you could do is you could go back into the slides and you could do a similar object. I did a polygon. Is this a polygon? But you could do, is this a platonic solid? That's maybe a term that you're not super familiar with. And so you could say, what is good evidence that would say this is a platonic solid or not? You can see here that we're not just doing science, we're doing geometry, we're doing math as well. But like, it doesn't matter. Like I can use the math as a mini lesson and then we can apply it into the science. The other one, if you want to go towards a real phenomena in science, there's an additional slide that we put down there where I have these objects, A, B, and C. And you could try to figure out what do you think's inside those objects, A, B, and C, just looking at the video. What you think is inside them is going to be your claim. And so this would be a fun way to kind of connect structure and function that we've talked about and then making an argument. As you go into the groups, I think the first thing prompt I would always give you when you go there is just start talking about the evidence. Okay, class, like what evidence do we see, or to the teachers in your group, and then try to make some kind of a claim. In the time given, you'll get about 10 minutes or a little less. You probably don't have time to do both. So choose one of them right away. And I'll try to visit the groups. If you got questions, you can hit me.
Hello again.
Hello. So we're recording in the breakout rooms too?
Or if you're doing the blocks, that's where your science comes in. So your reasoning would be based on science. Like since magnets are attracted to metal, we can infer that this is a metal and this is maybe wood or a non-metal. So like when you get to the reasoning, the kids, the two tools that you always have, I would tell kids, and you as well, is use either the definition in the question or use the science that we're learning. To connect it together. Because I heard some people say, yeah, we don't want to just restate the evidence again. Now, again, this is not just a science skill. I hope you're picking up on this. Like we should use this in social studies. We should use this in math. We should use this on Facebook. Good Lord. When somebody says something crazy on Facebook, we should say, that's a claim. What is your evidence and what reasoning do you have that goes along with that? Like it can make the world better if we teach kids skills like this. I know I have like a minute left. One big thing that I'm always kind of sharing is that we're working on a growing group of mini lessons. And so with the mini lessons, you can see it on the Wonder of Science. You'll see a video of me doing it with similar blocks. There will also be a Google slide deck. So you could do something similar with your kids so they could start kind of dragging their thinking around. But I guess like to finish, never feel guilty about doing direct instruction in science, as long as it's around how do we do science or how do we think like a scientist. We want to avoid the direct instruction. Are you with me on just this is how the science works? Because it kind of steals the wonder. A question in the chat was like, how long do you spend on a mini lesson? I try to get in and out. It's like I try to get in and out for like 5-6 minutes, and then they're back to another one. And I try to physically move them in the class too. like that transition is really important. We're hard on this, and now let's move over here and do some thinking. The Taylor's thing, two things that can help with the reasoning. The two things that I would say would use the definition in the question. That will help with the reasoning. And then the other thing is use the science that you're studying. What is the core idea that we're studying? And that will help them with the reasoning as well. So thanks so much for digging in. I know you're headed to another session. I hope to see you in a later date, or even I think we're going to hang out and maybe have a drink later. So like, come back. I'll see you then. And have a great next session. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
you.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Thanks.